Hi everyone, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. If you're watching it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the show, make sure to subscribe so that you get notified when a new show is released. And if you'd like to find links to videos or MP3 files, just go to miamighostchronicles.com, and you can also submit any eerie experiences you've had at the Submit Your Story tab. Also, hook up with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, where you can find information not only about new shows, but also about monthly free merchandise giveaways. So get comfortable, enjoy this new episode, and just imagine it's a dark and stormy night where not a creature is stirring, not even a mouse. And if a creature is stirring, you hope it's a mouse. Hi everybody, this is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How is everybody doing? Good, I hope. Well, I'm doing fantastic, even though this show is going to be delayed a little bit. I'm recording it now in October, my birth month, and it's a week out from Halloween, my favorite holiday. And with that in mind, I have a super fantastic, interesting guest. This is a gentleman by the name of Sirois. To say that he's skilled is an understatement. He has been helping families and individuals with, for lack of a better word, what you can call extreme hauntings. And even though he does have a gift as far as understanding, diagnosing, treating disturbances in home, he also uses the intelligence or the scientific side as far as understanding how to handle this. And one of the most important things that he makes mention is that his abilities are not just limited to healing homes. He heals people's lives as well. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is that people that have undergone extreme hauntings, by this it could be short duration, in some cases sometimes it's been going on for years, they sometimes have like a little bit of PTSD going on as far as getting beyond what their experiences were and the fear of it returning. And part of his ability is the understanding of how to work with people for them to move beyond what happened, besides understanding how it came about and to make sure that it doesn't come back. So anyway, let me bring him on, and of course I'm going to ask Shane what I ask all my guests, which is how he became involved with the paranormal, especially, and I have a feeling about this, that this was something that happened to him as a child. So Shane, am I accurate about thinking that your first encounter with something paranormal happened when you were a kid?
Yes, it started at age of 3. We lived in a home in Leominster, Massachusetts, and my mother would see, she'd see an apparition of a man staring at her. He'd be standing in a doorway staring at her. But I saw him walking through the living room one time, but I would see, it started off as like different people standing at the corner of the room, at the foot of my bed, kind of in the corner, staring at me, and they would start moving towards me. I'd close my eyes, I'd open my eyes, and they'd be back in the corner of the room, and we would just repeat this over and over and over until I fell asleep. Until one night I got up, and this is where it got really strange, is I got up and I went to go to the bathroom, and I walked through the kitchen, go in the bathroom. I'm walking back out. I feel 2 hands pressed firmly on the back of my shoulders, and it's behind me. I can't see what it is, and it forces me to the ground. And finally I fight it off, and I still can't see it, and it was dark and everything too. I run, and I jumped up over the base of the bed, the foot of the bed, and was just shaking myself in the air, trying to get this thing off me. And I land in the bed. I buried, because I'm little, I'm like 3-4 years old.
Sure.
I bury my head in between the mattress and the wall, and then finally after a little while nothing's happening, so I turn around and I lay on my right side so I could, facing, actually my sister's bed was across from me, and I could see her sleeping. and and there was nothing in the room. I really expected to see something, but there was nothing there. So finally, I start to feel like, I'm settling down. It took a little while, and I start to feel like I'm gonna, start dozing off. I close my eyes, and just as I start to feel like I'm, just ready to fall asleep, I feel a hand on my face, and I open up my eyes, and I kid you not, it looked like a gray alien, your typical gray looking alien standing there. Yeah, so
that is horrific. I'm telling you.
Yeah, so it was really bizarre. Now, of course, I was young, but these memories are very real to me, and I do believe that it did happen. I don't think there were imaginations, because I can remember even further back. I can remember when I was crawling as a baby,
Right.
So, but then we moved to we moved to Texas when I was, let's see, so it was about the age of 7 when we were in Texas. And we lived in San Antonio, and at that time, I would go to bed, and sometimes I wouldn't even fall asleep. I would just be laying there, and all of a sudden, I'd realize there's these 2 beings on either side of my bed. Your typical little grays.
Wow.
And yeah, and then a lot of times there'd be a real tall one. It looked the same, but he was really intimidating, and he was intelligent. These other 2 were like dummies. Like they took direction from him. He was the boss, and they would look back at him, and then they'd start their hands up towards my head, and I would black out. I don't remember what happens after that. And so sometimes, you start to know when they're there. And one night I was laying in bed, and I'm like, there's one outside my window. I know it. And I walked over to the window, and I look out the window, and there's one standing in the backyard, and it wants me to come out there. It didn't speak. I just knew that it wanted me to go out there. I black out. I don't know what happens.
Okay.
The very next day, my mother says, "Do you know you were sleepwalking last night? You tried to walk out of the house." But I was awake when I saw this thing, and then I don't remember after that. But she says,
right.
I walked through the house, and I was fighting with the door trying to get outside, but she used to find me like, all over the house, while we lived there. So, but then we moved, and nothing really happened after that until I reached the age of 10. And when I was 10, this is where it really began for me.
What?
Now,
oh my God. What happened? It was like, you would think that what would have happened would have been more than enough.
Yeah, so all that stuff, I didn't understand it. I didn't know. I was really young, so it didn't really understand how bizarre it was. I knew it wasn't normal, but it happened at such a young age that I think I accepted it a little bit more than if, adult first experiences something like that. So then, I reached the age of 10. We're living in Clinton, Massachusetts, which is where I pretty much grew up most of the time. And so I got really sick, and they did, the doctors didn't know what was wrong. My mother didn't have health insurance at the time, so she was hoping it would go away. She didn't take me into the doctors or whatever, but I couldn't eat or drink anything. I couldn't hold anything down for almost a month. And
wow.
And so, yeah, and that's not good,
That's a very long time, to be sick like that. Yeah.
So I was pretty much bedridden. I couldn't walk because I was so weak, and couldn't get around at all. So I was just basically shoved in a room and then closed the door, and weird things started to happen. Like if I got hot and I felt like a thunderstorm. There was one night the thunderstorm was coming. I could hear the wind blowing and the thunder, and I'm like, man, I want that window open so bad, but I couldn't get out of bed. And all of a sudden the window opened on its own. And so things like that started happening. But then one night, everything changed, because when you don't eat, your body's eating itself. So I'm achy. I'm uncomfortable. I don't, I just feel really horrible. And all of a sudden one night, it was just, the best way I can explain it is, all of a sudden, all that went away. I felt like I was part of everything around me, and everything was a part of me. Mm-hmm. And I knew I could sense, I could see, I could feel what everybody in the house was doing, and then beyond that,
Wow.
and it was a very strange feeling. And when you don't eat or drink, for you can
Yeah, that's what
hallucinate
a
and
lot
stuff
of
like that.
these religious or aesthetics do. When they like the hermit type that they're hoping for a vision. I was gonna say that's what it sounds like you have like an out of body or vision quest kind of thing.
Yeah, and so what? Further on in the story, there's I'll just keep going. Anyways, we'll get to that. But so then I notice there's a man sitting at the foot of the bed. It's like he's sitting on something, but there was nothing there for him to be sitting on. But it appeared he was at that level, like he was sitting.
Okay.
And it was really strange because he looked like a man that was trying too hard to look like a human, and he looked out of place. It looked really bizarre to me.
Okay.
He had darker skin, and his hair was black, but it was short and combed. His hair almost looked, it was so perfect that it almost looked like a helmet, like it was just placed on top of him. It just didn't look right to me.
Okay.
But this is where it gets weird. This is where I got my information on how to deal with negative parasitic hauntings.
Okay.
He goes, "You're going to be okay. This is happening for a reason. You're being brought here, so you're connected and you're tuned." Basically, is what he said. You're going to be tuned to the here, so you're always connected to this. And he says, because you're going to help people for the rest of your life. Now, at the time, that made no sense to me at all. And I'm 10 years old. But he then gave me information about the mechanics of what initiates a negative haunt, or attachment, some people like to say,
Right.
and what initiates it and what allows it to continue to go on, what allows that connection between the entity and the afflicted.
Okay.
And so he gave me a thorough understanding of that, and it made no sense to me, but I remembered it. It was just etched in my brain. So that same night, my mother and stepfather come home from the bar, and I can hear them giggling and acting stupid coming up the stairs, and so I opened my eyes because I was resting and I could hear their voice. So I opened my eyes and everything was white. I couldn't see anything. So I'm trying to see what's going on. I'm like, what's happening? I'm like, am I blind? Like, what's going on?
Right.
And I ended up spinning around, and I was looking down at myself, and I watched my stepfather pick me up and carry me down the stairs, and I was falling from behind. And then I black out, and I wake up in the car, in my body, and then I black out, and then at the ER, the emergency room, I wake up, or I have memory of it just all of a sudden, boom, now I'm like 30 feet in the air, and I'm watching them carrying me, walking into the emergency room from I'm about 30 feet in the air, and then I end up being like in the corner of the emergency room watching the doctors and stuff work on me and everything.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and then, so I was in ICU for a few days or whatever. Once I got stabilized, they moved me to a different wing,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm watching Monday Night Football at one night, and this nurse walks in, and so again, she looked very odd, like someone trying way too hard to look like a human and way too hard to look like a nurse. It looked really weird, and she came in and she sat down behind, like on the side of me, kind of behind me, and she was stroking my hair, and she goes, I used to do this with my son. I miss doing this with my son. And then she says, don't worry, you're going to be okay now. And I pass out, and I wake up because I used to come in to make sure I could wake up in the middle of the night with the flashlight and all that. So, excuse me, flashing that in my face. And I said, where's the other nurse? And I can't remember her name now. I can remember a lot of details, but I'm terrible with names. I'm great with faces, but and I said, where's so-and-so? And she goes, what are you talking about? She goes, I'm the only nurse covering this wing all night. She goes, because people called out sick. And but the funny thing is I started getting better immediately after her visitation. Yeah, so it was weird. And so after that, I truly believe that whatever these things were, that I was put in this position so I could learn, because it's hard to say this stuff without, because I don't want people to take it like I'm egotist, because I am totally not. But so when this information that I was given, it works 100% of the time, and so that's why it happened to me. This whole experience had to happen, so they were able to communicate this information to me, so I'd be able to help people, and that's what I've been doing. I've helped thousands of people over 30 years, because I started as a young teenager.
And Shane, let me ask you something. You mentioned a sister. Did you have any other siblings besides her, or was it just the two of you?
Very dysfunctional family, so it depended on what part of the...
No, you know why I was going to ask? I said, were you the target? Because sometimes everybody has their own experience, and sometimes in situations like what you're describing, there's the target child, where they're the ones that experience the whole range of stuff, and everybody else is oblivious. They like, huh? Except you. I know you mentioned that your mom had seen something, but did your sister ever see anything?
No.
Okay.
And I had that when I was young, as a 3-year-old. I had 2 sisters at the time, and then when I was 10, I had one of my sisters was living with my grandparents, my oldest sister, and then my other sister was living with us. But then by that time I had a younger brother. And then also I had 2 a stepsister and a stepbrother living with us as well. And when I was 10, so then as a young teenager, I started, because I this never left my head. All these experiences and what was told to me, and what does this all mean? And I just always had a lifelong passion to understand this stuff, and I have a very thirsty mechanical aptitude. Like, I have to understand how everything works 100%, not just, okay, well, if you throw this, it's going to hit something, but I want to understand every step of that process 100%, and if I get a radio for Christmas, and I remember when I was like 8, I got a radio for Christmas. I took it upstairs, I tore the thing apart because I wanted to understand, how the thing worked. That's just kind of how I am. So I wanted to understand what was told to me, and I wanted to understand every step of the way. And so it was always just something I thought about but didn't understand until I started to actually mess around with it. And, the first thing as a young teenager was the Ouija board. The Ouija board is nothing evil. There's nothing special about it, but what it is, it's a tool that focuses your attention on the possibility of an interaction. So you're telling these negative parasites that, hey, I will play with you. And so it focuses your attention on those things because they need your attention. And a lot of times, these teenagers that get in trouble with them, teenagers are typically, a lot of them are in a dysfunctional home, or they have vulnerabilities, and they're just emotionally not in the right place to be messing around with stuff like that. Because when you're in a vulnerable emotional state of being, you become a target to these parasites. They feed on it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They're transitioning into adulthood, and they're like, so you don't know what you want. You switch from day to day when you're going through that stage of your life. Let me ask you, do you think that guy that you saw sitting at the end of your bed, the one that you said that his hair was so perfect, do you think that was a guardian of yours? I haven't seen him in a while, but he stayed with me for, he would come in dreams. I would see him when I was awake. I would see him in different positions. He'd point me in certain directions. Dressed the same way. He had this plaid shirt, checkered, shirt. And I seen him basically, let's see, from the first time I was 10 years old. I saw him heavily around the time I was, nearing adulthood, 18, 19 years old. I saw him like a ton, and then he appeared periodically over the next few years, but I haven't seen him since. So I think I don't know. I think maybe he was kicking me off on my journey, and then once I started connecting dots, he was no longer needed, and I think. Yeah. Well, I've heard of that you have guardians through certain stages, and then once, like you, it's exactly like what you said. Once you're past the point of where they were helping you, then maybe a new one will come in. It's not
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily always have to be the same one throughout your life. That is so
yeah,
interesting. So you
yeah.
went
One
through
thing.
but let me tell you something. That's a really heavy thing that they laid on you as a kid. That's and
Oh
let me
yeah,
ask you,
yeah.
this whole thing in the background where you had, it sounds like an encounter with ETs. Was that part of? Was that running parallel to the spirit contact, or was it all meshed up together? Now that you look back at it, what was that?
It. I even wonder if these the spirit contacts, the ones that have given me this information,
Mm-hmm.
I because until I can figure everything out and I know for sure, I keep everything open,
Right.
and because I don't I have to prove everything to myself. I don't take anyone else's studies
Sure.
as I take everything as a grain of salt. I have to do the work myself, and I have to understand every step of the way
Mm-hmm.
before I can say for sure. So I'll never pose a theory as truth until I know for sure. But what I often wonder, and it almost could, because the when I'm around these alien type things,
Mm-hmm.
because it continues my whole life. It still happens
Okay.
today. They feel the same as the entities that were near my bed that were giving me information on how to deal with it. So I often wonder if these were not aliens posing like human-looking people
Okay.
to give me this information to deal with the parasitic entities, because these parasitic entities are a totally different life form.
Mm-hmm.
People call them demons. They call them, archons. There's all kinds of names for
Right.
them, but we don't know that there's any such thing like that. But
Yeah.
I actually believe that they're an actual life form, and just because we can't see them a lot of times, that
Mm-hmm.
we don't have a very broad visual light spectrum.
Sure.
That's why animals can see things that we can't, because they see a different light spectrum. So just because we can't see them doesn't mean that they're not a real thing. And I truly believe that these, what I call them parasitic entities, because it's a name that describes their personality and what they do.
Sure.
And because we don't know that they're demons that got bored playing cards with the devil down in hell, and they're going to come up here and mess with us,
Right.
you know.
Exactly. Well, yeah,
And
and it's
and
sometimes I guess it's and and also I was thinking along the lines, everybody of course always thinks of extraterrestrial life as like traveling through space and a UFO, whatever, but there's also that theory that what if the way that they come into our world is intradimensionally, which is like, then
but
we're talking about a whole host of things, as like you said, parasites, extraterrestrial life forms. Maybe they're coming and going into our world through a parallel or another dimension that runs alongside ours, and they just know how to manipulate it where they can come in and out, and
that's exact. Yeah,
and it
that's
can account
exactly
for a lot of things that sometimes people see, and then there's no proof, like where they came from or where they went.
right, right, right. And that's exactly what we think. They seem to be multiversal,
Mm-hmm.
and you know, it just really really appears that way. But what I do know about these parasitic entities, so I was told this, when I was 10, when I was sick, but I also see this because I put in place a process to identify trends within
Right.
each haunting, and I've done that since a very young age,
Mm-hmm.
and I started to notice common things that nobody else seemed to be picking up on, and it confirmed what I was told as a 10-year-old. Um,
Okay.
these things, these things are connected. They're initiated, and they're connected to us through frequency, through mostly emotional
Okay.
frequency. So when we're in a lowered, vulnerable, emotional state of being,
Mm-hmm.
our frequency is lowered, and therefore we become connected with these parasitic entities like a two-way radio. If you've
Okay.
got two walkie-talkies or two-way radios that are on different frequencies, they cannot communicate. So when we're in a vulnerable state, I'll tell you this, and I got to tell you a really cool story
Go ahead. I'm
to
all
elaborate
ears.
to elaborate on this. So when we're in a lowered emotional state of being, our frequency is equivalent to cancer, mold, mildew, other parasitic life forms, including these parasitic life forms that feed off of us, and not really just feed it. I think it's more connected to us, but attached to those lowered emotional frequencies. They need fear, attention, and negativity, or a vulnerability, and so, when we're elevated, we're in a good place and stuff like that, and we have no traumas or bad life experiences that are hurting our hearts or our minds, then these things cannot touch us. They cannot connect with us at all. So, I know you know Paulino, because I know Paulino's been on your show. So I'll tell you how I met him back in 1998.
Okay.
I got contacted by a guy. Actually, it was in a chat room. I used to, when I didn't have investigations late at night, I'd go on these AOL chat rooms like Haunted House or whatever.
I remember those. Wow, God.
Yeah. So I'd go in there and I'd give advice to people and stuff like that. I used to analyze dreams for people too, and there was this guy in there, and he was desperately seeking help and advice, and everyone was giving him the wrong advice, and he says, but he was being attacked, all kinds of bad things were happening. So I said a few things, and he private messaged me or instant messaged me right away, and then we talked. And this guy had been being attacked for 2 years, pretty bad, and all kinds of things happened to him. He'd see this disfigured lady kind of rise up in the corner of his room almost every night and everything. And so I said, he goes, but I have another investigator working here, but I really think you could help me too. And I said, well, I'm not going to step on anyone's toes, make sure this guy's okay. If he's going to stay, a part of it, I normally work alone. And Paulino, who was the guy that was there with him, also worked alone, but we said, yeah, we'll collaborate, we'll work together. And that's when I met Paulino. But, so when I got there, I think it was the first time I went there, Paul couldn't make it or something. And I meet him at the door. Like he comes outside on the porch and he goes, it's like they knew you were coming. He goes, because things were pretty quiet, and all of a sudden it got crazy over the last half hour. So we walk in. He walks into his living room. I'm standing in the doorway, and a lamp flies off his desk about 15 feet and hits him in the leg. And he goes, see, that's what I'm talking about. And he said it so nonchalant that I knew that he'd been dealing with much, much worse, because it didn't seem to faze him that much.
This is the tame stuff.
Yeah. So it was pretty crazy. I even took a picture of the entity. I was talking to him one time, and I started to notice, I could see his bedroom door. It was right behind where he was sitting, and all of a sudden it was like heat off the pavement, but it was all swirling. But it was kind of the same effect as heat off the pavement, but it was swirling around. I couldn't make out anything in his room. I said, what is happening there? I've seen it before, but it only in the real strong cases. So I get up, I start powering my camera. And now back then it was like the camera just came out. It was like top-notch camera, right? And this is funny. Sony Mavica, 1.3 megapixels that took a floppy disk. Okay. It cost me like $900. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's how long ago that was.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So I walk over to.
So only certain people of a certain age, believe it or not, are going to be able to relate and understand why I'm laughing about that. But anyway, go ahead.
Some of the listeners are going to be like, "What's a floppy disk?" So I'm standing in the doorway, and I'm trying to make out, what's happening. I'm just looking, but I can't see nothing. All of a sudden, all that commotion, that stuff in the air, starts to dissipate, and I start noticing something bobbing in and out from behind. There was a box fan that was sitting on top of a storage bin, one of those top, plastic storage bins. And I saw this head bobbing out and then going back in and bobbing out. And all of a sudden it comes out, more of that dissipates, and I can see now. And there's this thing, this entity, kind of looked human, but looked really bizarre, staring right at me. And black eyes, very black eyes, solid black. And I could tell two things, and I could feel it so strongly. This thing was afraid of me because it knew I knew how to get rid of it. It was definitely afraid of me, but it hated my guts. I could feel the hate coming off this thing like nothing I've ever felt before. It hated me so bad, but it did mess with me. It's just, it was afraid. And so basically what we did was, you know, that was like the first visit or so. And then me and Paul got there together, and I asked the gentleman, his name was Norman. I said, how long have you lived here? He goes, I've lived here for 11 years. He goes, my girlfriend's lived here for 11 years. I've lived here for 6 years. I said, how long have you been being attacked by this thing? He said, the last 2 years. So I said, then something happened 2 years ago that put you in a vulnerable emotional state of being, or something changed this environment, or something that changed you internally, like something had an effect on you. And he says, well, actually, it started happening 3 weeks after I was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer.
There you go.
Now, pancreatic cancer is pretty much a death sentence, right?
Yes.
So he was terminal, and he was put on meds. He couldn't work anymore, and who would want to, thinking, you know, they're going to die. And so he was just sitting at home now, thinking about the fact that he's going to die. Also a Vietnam vet, so he's thinking about all the memories of his friends being blown up in front of him in Vietnam, and so nothing but negativity. And he was also a recovering alcoholic, so he was in a very vulnerable spot, and he was in a perfect place for these parasites to just jump in and say, we got something here, you know. And they started tormenting him, because their ultimate goal is to get you into the fear frequency, to get your frequency to that fear level.
Yes, it's
and
like
that's when they
attract like sometimes in some cases is what you're describing.
Yeah. And so they need that. That's what they want the most. So, and that worked, because he woke up one night to this entity. The first time I was there, he called me the very next morning. I had only slept for 6 hours. He called me. He's like, you got to come back down here. I woke up at like 3-something in the morning. He goes, and there was a disfigured lady's face inches from mine, and his hair turned white. He looked 100 years older than when I just last saw him. He literally aged. His hair it was salt and pepper. His hair turned white just from this experience. I thought that was only in movies, you know, but.
Yeah, right, exactly. So you, in other words, you knew this guy saw something horrific.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. So here's what we did. So we asked him, how long have you lived here? My girlfriend's lived here for 11. I've lived here for 6. I've been being attacked 2 years. What happened 2 years ago? I was diagnosed with cancer. So he said, okay, what we need to do is you're in a vulnerable state. You're in a negative place. So we need to elevate, you know, your emotion. And there's no other way better to do that than to get him to do something physically that so he cannot revert back to those thoughts, something that actually occupies his internal dialogue and his mind, his body, some kind of action where it occupies him so he doesn't revert back. He's busy doing something positive, so he can't think of the negative. And so I said, you know, you got to take walks, volunteer at the soup kitchen, you know, do something that makes you feel good about yourself, but stay active doing something positive that makes you feel good. And so he actually did that. He volunteered at a soup kitchen, and the soup kitchen was in the basement of a stone church. That same stone church, for some reason, was scheduled to be torn down. It was the oldest stone church in Rhode Island, and he led a fight to save it. So now he's on the front page of the paper. He's on the nightly news. He had drive. He had purpose. He was doing something positive. The entity disappeared. It just vanished, gone. It was just boom, connection broken. And not only that, his cancer disappeared off of X-ray. He's still alive today, and he's cancer-free. That is 1 out of 3 cases that I've done in my life where the cancer and the parasite disappeared at the same time.
In other words,
that is no.
Let me ask: when you were saying the parasite, you're talking here a non-human entity, right?
Yes.
Even though I know you said that he saw a woman, but as far as you're concerned, your sense was that it was a non-human entity.
Yeah. You know, I don't think they're human, but they're definitely a life form. They're definitely some kind of life form, but we call them parasitic. You know, parasitic entity, because it basically labels what they're doing, their personality, what they want. They're parasitic, and so other people would call them demons and whatever else.
Right. No, I know everybody sometimes, and of course the demon, the D word, is so much scarier. I think it's overused. Let me ask you, Shane. Do you think there's any possibility? Because I know you said that basically his diagnosis of the cancer was like what this was the event, the triggering event. Do you think that it was the way he was feeling, or was it something that he picked up maybe when he went to the hospital, something that basically gravitates around where there's illness and death, or it was just something that he called to himself because he basically, like what you said, he thought, I'm dying.
Right. It was the fact that he was in a vulnerable, lowered emotional state of being,
Okay.
and so when we're down there, think of it in frequency. I can't say frequency enough.
Mm-hmm.
Actual frequency, measurable frequency. When we can connect with these entities, when we're elevated, we're in a good place. They can't talk to us. They can't communicate with us.
Okay.
These parasites. They might come into your house. They might try to do something,
Mm-hmm.
but if if you don't offer that fear and that
Right.
attention, then they're not going to elevate. But they truly connect with people that are, and I'll to point this out too. But people that are in lowered emotional state of being, or fearful too. Fear is another thing. So that's why a lot of people, when they get into this paranormal work or use a Ouija board, they get an attachment themselves, is because they're afraid.
Sure.
Not only are they given attention, but they become a little nerved and fearful, and that's what they want from you. So they connect with you, and they attach to you. So I was going to say,
Well, you know what? I tell everybody, anybody that's done this work for a length of time, and inevitably, you go through the cases that are nothing there, or but you run across certain cases that they're scary, for lack of a better word. Most people, I realize after a while, they need to take a sabbatical. They need to step back because they feel almost like what you're describing. Like, I need to step away from this and just live a regular life where I'm not dealing with dead people or people, suffering from haunting. Like, they have to create that boundary because I think they feel in themselves the danger that comes
right,
of doing this with no break in between. Like, in other
yeah,
words, you're alive and whatever it is dead, or in this case, a parasite, but feeds on fear.
right, and yeah, and people get weirded out sometimes because we get a lot of questions asked. I co-host on Paulina's show a lot, and we get
Mm-hmm.
questions there. And I do other shows. I just started my own show too, and but the question comes in a lot that you know people say, well, you tell people that they shouldn't do this work, but you do it, But really, that's not what we mean. It
Yes.
it takes the right character type, and I've helped so many investigators that got in trouble. Like, I'm talking
Mm-hmm.
bad trouble. There was this one investigator who was older than me, said he was very experienced, but he says, but I need to learn from you. Can you mentor me? And so I said I met with him and I agreed to. This guy I took him to one case, and what he experienced, he thought, he told me he was very experienced with all this stuff, that he's witnessed it. What he experienced in this house, what he witnessed, blew his mind so much that he ended up going cuckoo a little bit. He ended up losing his house. He lost his wife. He
What?
lost his job. Yeah, this guy he had like a house, like it was like a $600,000-700,000 home. Lovely wife. He had a six-figure job, and he lost everything. He's living in a trailer home in a very nasty city right now. And now what happened was I helped him through that, and I got him better.
Okay.
So at this time he was spiraling bad. So I got him through all that. I fixed everything. He still had his house, his wife, and his job at the time. But
Right.
I told him, no more paranormal work for you. We can stay friends. We'll hang out. We'll do stuff. But you're not doing the
Right.
paranormal with me anymore. He opened up his own website,
Oh.
started to try to help people, and
Oh.
he got himself in trouble again. And
What?
lost everything.
You know
So
what?
there's
I'm so glad you brought that up because on some of my other shows I mentioned it, I'm gonna blame it on all these paranormal reality shows that make it look so exciting. And it's like, even if you think, man, this is fascinating, or I would love to do that, that sounds exactly like what you said. Not everybody has the temperament, or how can I say, the mental. It's a bunch of emotion. It's a bunch of things that to handle an investigation like what you're describing. Because yeah, sometimes you're
right.
gonna go to some stuff there's nothing there. It's like, okay, somebody with a great imagination, or a raccoon in the attic. And then, okay, so what's the worst? You tell the person, no. Or maybe something that's a residual, but somewhere along the line, if you get somebody that their boundaries have been violated, a host of other things that runs across something like what you're describing, a very dark or malevolent haunting or attachment or something going on in that house, they've got basically a big bullseye on their head.
Oh yeah,
For an
absolutely.
attachment. You know, and they don't want to hear it. Like exactly like what you just described. You gave them your best advice, like, hey, stay away from this type of work. Not temporarily, as in forever. And he, like you said, he went off and he started it. But let me ask, what happened to him originally? Was it something that he witnessed, or something that attached to him from that case that he went with you on to begin with? What happened?
Well, he believed something followed him home, but nothing did.
Okay.
I'm extremely scientific, but I'm very sensitive to these things because like I said, I've been connected to it. So once you've experienced it and you're kind of brought into that area, and I'm talking like a near death, which I've had 3 in my life, then you're tuned to things. And basically, when I was 10, that's really when it happened. But so you can feel these things. You just sense it. And so nothing did follow him home. He believed it. He believed something did. He started to associate anything that happened with something followed him home. Like, if something fell off the shelf, and he couldn't shut it out from his internal dialogue. It was controlling his internal dialogue. Something's here. What's going to happen? What's going to happen?
That's not good.
But 2 things did happen. He did witness in the basement of this house. There was we got pictures of them too, light discharges, but they almost look like it's hard to explain but anyways, there was light discharges. There was also one with like tails that were just like moving around the basement. But him and there was other investigators at this location at one point where they were all attacked by something. Something surrounded them. They got earaches. They got headaches. They had to get out of the basement immediately because they were in pain. This happened to him, but he couldn't move. I went over. I was walking through, and he's just sitting there, and he was like shaking, and he's like, I can't move. And
wow.
He was the perfect type of person. That he had a very paranoid personality.
Yeah, I was about to say, you're describing as somebody that's paranoid. Like you said, every little thing was, it wasn't like stuff that happens to everybody. Like what you said, he read into it that it was a result of what had attached to him or followed him home.
Right. Yeah. And so,
that's not good.
Now I'm chasing this thing around. I go into, I feel the cold spot. This thing, and I feel my hair moves and everything. It runs away from me, and I'm going around the basement. I find it again, and it runs away from me. My hair moves, and I'm chasing this thing around. Now the difference between me and these other investigators was, it's 100% without a doubt programmed in me that I have no fear of these things whatsoever, because I know how to get rid of them. 100%. And so the process that I use, it absolutely works. And when you have no fear, they have no power on you. Yes. And I absolutely do not fear them at all. They're so easy to get rid of from, with this process that I use that was given to me, that I look down on them. People give them so much power, but it's like, if you realize how cowardly and simple they are, right, and how easy it is to get rid of them, they're pathetic, and it just is how it is. And
let me ask you something, Shane.
It's terrible.
Once, let's say if somebody's got an attachment from one of these parasites, and let's say you help this person get rid of it, are they vulnerable after that? As in, they got to be careful where they go, what they do, because it could allow another parasite to come in, or that's it.
See, and this is a good question, and I'll tell you why. So one of the things, I'm going to answer this in 2 different ways, but to illustrate, I started to realize, when I was real young, when I started doing this work, why do everyone turns to like religious or spiritual practices to get rid of these things. And so, but it doesn't seem to work all the time. And most of the time it doesn't work. Right. And sometimes it does work, and it works for a little while, but then it comes back. And when it comes back, it's a whole lot worse. Yes. So I started to, this was in my process. Okay, let's find out why. And so I go in after, I've gone in after hundreds of priests, and this is not knocking any religion or nothing like that. Every religion is good if it's done for the right reason. The problem I have with a lot of religions is they're fear-based. If you do this, you're going to burn, and that is why a lot of my worst cases were people that were dysfunctionally religious. They were in religions that used fear, and these people lived in fear, and they became targets. And yet, so if the religion was going to be used to get rid of the entity, why did it not circumvent the attachment to begin with? Exactly. So I started to look at these things. So what I realized was the religious practice works if it has a positive effect on the afflicted, but it not on the entity. It has nothing to do with the entity, that process. And because I've gone in after so many priests to realize that's the case. So if it has a positive effect on the afflicted and raise them out of that lowered state that they were in, and they can sustain that, then the entity stays gone. But the problem is most people, they feel lifted at the moment during this religious practice that was done in their home. They feel lifted for the moment, but then they revert back to their old ways of thinking and their old issues, and the entity comes back, and it's worse than ever. Right. So this is how it is. So therefore, that taught me that these practices, whether smudging does do some good. It is a purifier and stuff like that, but it's not going to keep that thing gone. It might make it leave for the moment, but if you revert back to your old ways of thinking, it's coming back because it's connected to you. And so So
and let me ask you, does that account for why people will say, after a while, you realize you're not living in the haunted house, you're the one that's haunted, because this thing follows them from location to location?
Yeah, and that's what I tell people. In the event of negative haunts, it's not the home being haunted, it's the person. That is a fact. I mean, in my work, I have so much documentation to show this. And so, I had another point to make, but I forgot.
Anyway, we'll get, and one of the things I wanted to mention, which I think was so interesting, you remember how you said that encounter that you had with that entity, that you could feel like this hate. In other words, this pure hate towards you. Yep. And that is one of the things I've heard from experienced exorcists, including priests. As a matter of fact, the late Dr. Malaki also mentioned it, that was one of his tip-offs when he encountered somebody that was truly possessed, because he says you felt the hate that this entity felt towards you. He says it's nothing like, you can have another human being dislike you, or even what they call hate, but he says that the description was pure, unadulterated, malevolent hate. You feel it.
Yeah, and so that's absolutely true. But so that's another thing I was going for on that last question was no, I forget it again. It just blew my mind. It just left me. It was about the religious practice and why it doesn't usually work. And because like I said, I've gone in after hundreds of priests. I've gone in after most of the famous demonologists that we know and see on TV, and in a lot of all the other investigators, and I help a lot of investigators, and they're all pretty much using the same type of tactic. And so there's a reason why that doesn't work. So a long time ago, I was like, well, why not? So I unlearned everything I thought I knew, and I just put down that process to identify these trends and to use the knowledge that was handed to me, gifted to me, and so I started to realize that these practices do not treat the root cause. They're a tool that basically, if it can get the person in the right emotional state, then it will break the connection, but it usually doesn't happen. So therefore, those practices are a placebo. Yeah. That's all they are.
You're right.
And So what I do is I manipulate the true mechanics, and we are participants in an interaction with these entities. So I end up being, so I have to identify the root cause with the person. So a lot of times I'm a marriage counselor, I'm a drug counselor, I'm just
Yes.
a psychologist,
Yes.
and I have a background in all that too. I have pretty broad background in human services.
Right.
And so, well, I'll tell you one story. There was this. I got contacted by a 51-year-old lady from Connecticut, southern Connecticut, down by the seacoast.
Right.
She said, my mom's being attacked and raped and stuff by something. Her mom's 72 years old. So she had two famous groups go in there. She had a priest go in there, and it just got worse and worse and worse. It just kept happening. Nothing seemed to help. And so basically then they heard of me, and I go down and I said, okay, so when did this all start happening? She said, after my husband passed away.
There you go.
And so what it was she had history. She had a bad memory in her life that happened as a child, but her husband was a WMT diabetic who needed a lot of care. So she was busy. She was occupied. Her internal dialogue was occupied caregiving to him and keeping her from going into these bad moments, these reliving, these memories in her head. So and they also were best friends. So they were having, they'd talk all day long, and she'd have to do a lot of care for him and stuff like that. But when he passed away, she had nothing to do. Being retired and stuff is to sit at home. And what do we do in our old? Well, we're not old that old yet.
That
but
unresolved trauma doesn't matter if it happened 60 years before.
Right. And so we start to reflect on our lives. And now what happened was she's been being raped. She went through menopause in her 50s. She got raped at one time. She went to the bathroom. She had blood. And she could hear two things in the room when this has happened. There's one doing something to her, and then there's another one in the room she can hear. And now she'd be grabbed by her ankles and slid down towards the base of the bed. So her daughter one night, who was 51, and both very intelligent women too, been successful too, by the way. Her daughter stayed the night with her one time. She goes, I could tell my mom's going through something, but I didn't expect this. What happened this night? She said they were both on their back. She wrapped her leg around her mom's leg, like over the top of her mom's leg, to make her mom feel comfortable, and secure. She said, Shane, there was a head that started to rise up through the sheets at the foot of the bed and start moving up towards us. And she goes, I jumped out of the bed, I ripped the covers off, and there was nothing there. She goes, but it was real. She goes, there was something there. And so when I asked the lady when it started happening, like I said, her husband passed away. So I said, so what happens? She starts reflecting on her life. And as a child, from the age of 6 until she can remember, until she was old enough to move out of the house, her father molested and raped her. Her father would crawl in.
I was about to tell you the trauma that she had as a child. Yeah, boy.
He would crawl in on his hands and knees, go to the base of bed, grab her by the ankles, and slide her to the base of the bed and molest her. I don't know how much I can say, but with his mouth and his parts.
Right.
And,
exactly. Right.
And so now she goes, is it my father? I said, no, it's not your father. What it is, it's a parasite feeding on this. You don't have to say it out loud. It knows through emotional frequencies and thought frequencies exactly how to push your buttons, and it's doing what it needs to do to keep you in that vulnerable state. It's acting like your father. And so somebody else she had talked to said, oh, well, you have to forgive your father. And I said, that's stupid. I said, you don't have to forgive your father. I said, what you need to do, there's a difference. You don't have to forgive him. You don't forgive somebody of that, especially until they make amends. But if they change their ways, and then maybe you could do that. But what you need to do is you need to accept that it happened. You need to accept it as part of your life.
Exactly.
And so it made you who you are.
Is she was exactly what you're saying. Even if she forgave him, she would still be the victim. And what you're telling her is we have to get you out of that victim mentality, because she was being victimized. That's what it sounds like, victimized all over again, like she was as a child.
Yep, that's exactly what I told her. I even use that same word, victim mentality, but also you need to focus on more positive and realize that your life experience led to the person that you are today. Beautiful home, great. Her daughter was very successful. Her children, her grandkids, and like I said, both very charming, very intelligent people.
Mm-hmm.
So, you have a lot to be thankful for. It's not a good memory. You need to accept that it happened and just
Right.
let it go. Let it go,
Yeah, and
and
I
free
imagine
yourself from
even
it.
at this point, probably her dad was dead. I take it if she was already in her 70s, what you're gonna go a guy that's dead? It's like, you know,
Yeah.
he's
So I get emails from him. This was like 4 years ago or so, and every year
okay.
I get an email from him saying that thank you so much, thank you so much. This thing's been totally gone. We haven't seen it. Nothing's happened at all. And so I didn't have to go in there and splash holy water around, read from a Bible,
Right.
do smudgings or nothing like that. All I did was go in there and educate them on the mechanics and what they were doing wrong and how to fix it, and counsel them a little bit. And as long as fortunately all the people I go to help finally understand that. Some people are hard to convince of this process because they're so used to what they see on
Yeah, I
TV.
was gonna
And
say, yeah, if you're not throwing holy water around or something more dramatic, for lack of a better word, it's like,
yeah,
uh, yeah, because that thanks Hollywood, you know.
right, right. But one thing I do know is this process works 100% of the time,
Yep.
and it doesn't fail. And um, you know,
Yeah,
there was
I truly
one.
believe that sounds so um people and it is exactly like you said, when you would maybe when you looked at this woman from the outside, she was very successful and she had brought up her family. Like you said, anybody looking from the outside, not knowing the trauma or what had happened to as a child, would think, okay, but that incident, which was horrible and was systemic for so many years, that basically was something that she was enduring, for lack of a better word, till she was what, in her 70s. You said that's horrible.
Yeah, 72. Yeah. So,
And there's a lot
but
of people
that's
like that. There's a lot of people like that. That that
oh yeah,
that even if they're not going through something as dramatic as maybe a parasite attachment, they still haven't come to terms, like you said, with what happened to them. You know, they and they go on, and sometimes I don't even talk to anybody about it, which is the worst part. And probably, who
right,
knows, if
right,
she wouldn't have ever said anything to anybody if it wasn't for the fact that she was getting attacked.
right, right. Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It's horrible. So there's
And you said, so you go in, you're the cleaner. You know how they talk about these guys that go in, when there's a murder, the cleaner, you're the psychic cleaner. You
yeah,
go in there after everybody's like messed everything up and going, sorry, but it didn't work. So they call you in. But
yeah.
it's
And it's really hard to. I help a lot of other investigators, and there's a lot of ego in this
oh
work,
shoot.
and so unfortunately, there's a lot of investigators that won't reach out, and I've and they'll just leave their client high and dry because they
Mm-hmm.
know they can't fix the problem, and hopefully, a lot of these find their way to me eventually. But then there are a lot of investigators that, and I would never name drop, but you'd be shocked if I told you some of the names I've gone in after and what these investigators have done. Like, I'm talking like big names and stuff.
Oh yeah, believe
And
it.
it's terrible. It's terrible. But if it's okay to say you don't know, that you're stuck,
Yes,
the main,
God, it's like
the,
it's like I've spoken about this in other shows. It's like there's a point where, let's say, you go into what you think is a normal investigation. When I say a normal, I don't mean anything malevolent or along these lines. But somewhere in there, you realize, by either like what you described, like okay, there's no shame in retreat, to reconnoiter,
right,
and say, you know what, I'm out of my depth. And of course, like you said, you don't leave that client high and dry. But before you make it worse, you're better off saying, let me see what I can do for you. And you need to leave, because a lot of times, like you said, if their ego gets in the way, they end up making things worse for that poor client.
Oh yeah, and a lot of these people do that too, and their techniques while they're there too. A lot of times they're so focused on evidence and they use antagonistic techniques to try to get evidence, and they're making it worse. It's at the
Yeah.
expense of the client, and that's the
Yes.
most. If a client calls me and says, I'm being attacked, I have a negative thing, I need it gone, I don't care about taking pictures. I don't take pictures. I don't take EVPs. I don't do none of that. I go in there and I get rid of the problem. Now, if somebody calls
Yes.
me and
Right.
says, hey, we got stuff happening in the house, we just want verification. It's not harmful or nothing like that, but we just want verification so we know we're not crazy. Then I'll go in there and I'll use my
Right.
equipment. But if someone's being, the family's being traumatized, I go in there and I deal with the issue. But these other groups, they don't do that. And fortunately, there's been some quite a few groups, quite a few investigators over the years that put that ego to rest, and or they're more humble than most of the other ones, and they get a case and they know it's over their head, and they'll call me and says, we really need your help, and I've gone in there and I've helped them, and every one of those cases are still problem free, and that's that. And I try to help them. I try to help them with the understanding of the investigators themselves. I try to teach them and stuff, and help them to do better work in the future and have a better understanding.
So, in answer to that question that I asked you about, people that, let's say you go in there and you help them, and for lack of a better word, you clear it. Are they still vulnerable if they fall back into what were you talking about, like the fear, or whatever it was that triggered them into that it could come back? In other words, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's why my process is different. So for all these other techniques, what they do is they elevate the person for the moment. It gets rid of it. That's the reason why it works. It doesn't have an effect on the entity itself. If it has a positive effect on the individual, then it breaks the connection. This thing can't really feed it. It goes somewhere else. But if you fall back in that old way of thinking, it comes back. So with my process is a lot of it is an education to the afflicted, and also guidance to get them out of where they are. If they're in this lowered emotional state, this vulnerable state, I pinpoint what the issue is. If it's a childhood memory, if it's a cancer diagnosis, whatever it is. Like I said, I've been a drug counselor, all kinds of different things. I have to treat people in their personal matters, in their heal their hearts and help their minds and get them on a positive track. And
Yes.
so, and I teach them how to stay that way so this thing does not return. And they know if they do revert back. I had a case in Rochester, New Hampshire. Most of my cases aren't in my own state where I live, but most of them are everywhere else. But there was one, Rochester, New Hampshire, back in 2003, where this family was very, very, very active, and they've had all kinds of people go in there and try to help them, and it didn't work. And so the problem I was having with this family was to get them to talk about things. They were thinking, like, they had a shaman go in there, do a smudging. It didn't, helped a little bit, and then it came back, and then a priest and whatever else. So they weren't used to my technique. They thought it was just going to be, you go in there, you do some kind of weird thing, and the thing disappears. But so I'm asking them questions, and I'm not so direct. I start slowly to get people to open up, and I don't force them to talk about their personal issues. I do it in such a way that they start opening them up on their own. But the problem I was having was, when I was doing this, it's all started with the lady of the house, the mother of the house. And whenever she wanted to talk, she would kind of cower her head, and she would look at her husband, and he would just give her a look, and she wouldn't talk. And he was, with his eyes, I could feel it emotionally, that he was telling her, don't you dare talk, about stuff. But so I knew there was issues, marital issues and everything else. So finally we got her alone, and I had a team at the time, and me and my assistant were standing in the bedroom. We walked in there. She was going to show us something real quick, and the father was occupied with somebody else. I shut the door, and so I asked her some questions to get her to open up that weren't so direct. And I can't remember what I asked her, but when when she started to answer, she looked anxious, like I can finally talk, and it was like she wanted to get out so bad. And when she did that, there were like sparks all around her head, just like these discharges around her head, which
Right.
I've seen before. It's not that common, but they're like mini fireworks almost. And my assistant grabbed my arm and was squeezing because she had never seen anything like that.
It's like,
And so, but basically, what it was they had the guy had a son from his first marriage, this kid was kind of like not in a very good place, and he moved in with them. He was in his early 20s, and he was doing bad things, and it was causing huge problems between them in their relationship and everything. And so this entity showed up and started attacking the mother. And so I told her, if something happens, ignore it like nothing ever happened. Don't give it no attention. Just act like matter of factly, like, oh, okay, so the plate slid off the desk. Oh well, no big deal.
right.
Just don't let it phase you at all. Don't think about it. Wipe it clean from your internal dialogue. Don't think about what's going to happen next. What's going to happen next. Try to occupy yourself with positive actions, positive things. And so she was doing all that. And what this entity did was, okay, if you're not going to pay attention to me, I know how to get you to pay attention to me. And it started going after the kids.
Yes.
And so a 4-year-old got thrown through a bathroom on one of our visits. Luckily, he was okay. And so then I had to basically treat the whole family. And once I got them to understand the process, the thing disappeared. And it was like, let's see, that was number 3. So probably 7 years later, I had heard from him periodically for a little while, and then everything was good. So I didn't hear back from him. It was like 7 years later, I found their number in my files, and I decided to give them a call and see if everything was all right. And they said, yeah, we're still good. She said twice we fell back into our old ways, and it started to come back. So we're like, oh, we have to do what Shane said. And she goes, when we did that and everything was fine, it would go away again. So she's.
And what happened? Did that older son, did he continue living there? Was he in on the plan to, like, as far as what they needed to do, or what happened with him?
Yeah, I think he ended up moving out, and if I remember correctly.
Okay.
But there was other issues too, like with the marriage. I could, sense.
Well,
and
I was
also,
about to say, because that dirty look she was getting from her husband, that's that was that's not a good thing.
Like the couch smelled like dirty feet and beer, so I knew he's been sleeping there for during the night. That was a clear indication. Not only just sensing it, but it was just the evidence was there, And but all in all, they were. I like the people.
No, I
but
know exactly what you mean, but in other words, it's like, okay, well, maybe the finger points immediately to this thing about your kid, but there's other stuff that was going on here that made it manifest easier, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So I take it you didn't sit long on that sofa? Only kidding. You know why I'm saying that? Because I've been to some places where it's like, no, I don't care how tired I am, I'm not sitting on that sofa. Like, no, because exactly like. No.
It's crazy, because a lot of the cases that we do, like over the years, right now, everyone that I get now, and it's been this way for years, or an actual parasitic attachment. But there was a period there where, gosh, because I do FM shows, I do internet shows and lecture abroad and everything, and so and TV once in a while, and so you do some of these radio shows, for instance, and you get contacted from people, and they're like, oh yeah, we got stuff happening in our house, can you come by? And so like this one time I drove 4 hours one way, 4 hours up, and I don't charge. I don't charge people, and I make money. I own a remodeling business, but I also make money doing some of the the lecturing that I do and other stuff that I do
Mm-hmm.
in the field. But I don't charge people that are having these issues. You know, it
Right.
wouldn't be right. So, and I of course I've had people insist and wouldn't have it any other way and give me money, but I would never ask, and I don't, and I
Right.
tried not to take it, but there's some people that just won't not let me take it. But so, but one time I drove 4 hours one way, and I get there and they're just asking me about, oh, how long have you been doing this, you know, and oh, tell us your craziest case,
And
and
you're like,
so
huh?
basically just yeah, so basically just wanting to meet me. So what's going on here? Well, not much, you know, and okay, you know, so basically, you know, they just wanted to meet you or whatever, and it's flattering, but it just cost me like $150 to come here, you know,
Right.
you know,
It's
so
I want to say that sometimes people, you get those personalities which they're, for lack of a better word, they're kind of narcissistic, or it's like all about them, like you said, I just drove 4 hours and it cost me money. And
yeah.
for you to what, to ask me about my life? Like what? Yeah,
But
yes.
I love talking about this stuff so much, so it's easy just to kind of like get over it,
Well,
you know, because at least you get to talk about it with somebody who's interested too, you know.
but you know what? The way I
But
think about it is that time that you spent with them, maybe there was another case that you could have, somebody that had legitimate, you know, that they needed you, in other words, really needed you, versus like,
yeah,
because let me tell you, driving, that's a 4 hour, that's an 8 hour by the time you got back. That's, people don't realize driving can be tiring.
oh yeah, yeah,
And
definitely, and
this is the,
um,
have you ever had situations, because what you're describing is stuff that's happening externally, like things getting thrown, and of course people reacting and the way they're feeling. Have you ever had where it's actually affecting their behavior? Almost like, you know, when, I'm going to use possession because that's the best. Even I'm not talking about the traditional thing of possession, but where it actually alters the person's behavior.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, it really takes a lot out of people because you know, these things are drawing off of you,
Mm-hmm.
so it does affect people physically, but also therefore eventually becomes emotionally too, and it really gets in their head and it drains them, and you know, whether it's they become depressed, but they're that part of the process is kind of what they need too, because they want you to become lowered, they
Right.
want you to be depressed. That's where they need you, so it's kind of like playing into their hands. But yes, I've definitely seen it, and where people become withdrawn, and you know, marriages fail, and you know, relationships, and people pull away from their children, children pull away from their parents. Absolutely. And but here's a story that just happened,
Mm-hmm.
because it's some of these things are not always this. So I do, you know, I'm well known for my dealings with the parasitic entities, but I do ufology as well, and
Okay.
so I've been doing a lot of lectures recently. For some reason, I did back to back to back UFO conferences,
Okay.
and I did one one that I did very well known on the East Coast here, one of the biggest ones. And I spoke, and then there was these people that were there, attendees or whatever, that had friends that had a son that was institutionalized in a facility for people with disorders, you know, mental disorders and everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And but it was more like a resort. It was an upscale type of place, you know. It was
Right.
nice, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so this Latino couple, they approached me. They, oh, we got friends, you know, and so they put them in touch with me, and this other Latino couple contacts me. They have a son. His name was Danny. He was 26 years old. He's in the facility, and beautiful people, very successful too. You know, they had money, did well with their lives, and their son was very intelligent, honor roll student all through high school and everything. But something happened when he was 17. Well, for something, he went to visit his grandma in Puerto Rico when he was younger, and he
Okay.
saw he said he saw a shadow person in her house,
Okay.
and then so that's where it began there. But then when he was 17, they went to Sedona, Arizona, and something happened to him. He was having panic attacks. He disappeared from his family. They couldn't find him, and he told me he went without eating for a while. He was like fasting without wanting to, and that made his issues a lot worse.
Sure.
And he felt that whatever was affecting him, it was getting worse when he didn't eat. So then when he was 25, because he hasn't been in this institution for that long.
Okay.
Because when he was about 25, now all of a sudden, this voice is telling him to hurt his family, hurt himself.
Okay.
He says, I hear it. It's telling me to hurt people and hurt myself, and I don't want to hurt my family. I love my family, and
Right.
and so because I am driving. He was in Vermont. I had to drive up to Vermont quite a ways to meet with him, and we spoke, just me and him, me and Danny. The father took a walk, and I interviewed him because they thought that that he might have an attachment, and that it wasn't his diagnosis. He was diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is a form of.
That's what I was going to say.
Kind of like,
what was he diagnosed with? Some type of schizophrenia or psychosis? So
yeah,
but they're thinking,
like,
okay, and I know what these parents were thinking. So what happened when you were talking to him? This is super interesting.
Yes. Yeah, so they wanted to say, well, Shane has a 100% success rate getting rid of these negative entities. We think that he actually has an attachment, so he can fix Danny and stuff like that. And so I said, well, let me meet with him. I do have a background in disorders and disabilities and human services and stuff like that. So I was able to ask the right questions to, determine, if he had an attachment or if he had a psychosis or disorder, and no question that I asked him led me to believe that there was no answer that he gave me that would tell me that he had an attachment. A lot of the questions weren't leading. Some of them were more obvious, like, does any paranormal activity happen around you? Nope, he says, And, well, does this happen? No. Does this happen? No. So does it vocalize through your physical mouth, or is it just voices in your head? He said, just in my head. No, can anybody else hear him? No, nobody else can hear him. And so did it ever tell you anything that you wouldn't know otherwise had it not told you? No, except for one word. It was a word that meant peace or joy in a different language, and he said that he didn't know that language or that word prior to, but that was the only thing. But so I honestly 100% believe that his diagnosis is accurate. Right. And I said, so I think you're in the right place. I said, but I told him, even you can improve your diet and eat certain foods that will absolutely fuel your brain to improve your symptoms dramatically, because they're seeing dramatic improvements in people with autism and other types of disorders and disabilities that are brain associated with the ketogenic diet, high fat diets that are helping the brain function. And kids that haven't been able to speak their whole lives are now talking.
Yes.
And, and so I said, you can do that. And it's, that this will help. And so I still try to help them, but I think they were all, I think Danny became depressed and felt like, I think he kind of momentarily gave up hope because he really thought he had an attachment. And where I told him I don't believe he did. I think he respected my experience and stuff, and he disappeared. I got a phone call from his parents. His father texted me. His mother called me crying. Danny disappeared without a trace. He was on the computer at 9:30 one night. At like 11 or so, a counselor saw him, and saw him somewhere. I don't know. Didn't speak with him, but then in the morning he was gone. Vanished without a trace. Didn't take any of his personal belongings.
So this was in other words, this facility was not locked. He wasn't locked in. He could come and go at will.
apparently it's pretty odd, right? And we're talking in the middle of nowhere too. This is like total country, in the
Right.
middle of Vermont, and so he was gone, I think, for like 3 days, and they finally found him, and he has not talked about why he left. He acts like nothing happened, like everything's okay. He's back to the way he was, like nothing. And it's sad, but I say that because now his father is an RN, a registered nurse,
Right.
and his father says that I work in facilities where there are people that are diagnosed with disorders that I absolutely do not believe have those disorders. I think they have attachments, and
Yep.
I absolutely agree because we've seen this. I've worked in hospitals. I've been
Yes.
called into hospitals anonymously. They said you can't tell anybody because we'll lose our jobs, and this is the way they're being treated, but we don't believe that that's what they have because things are moving around the room, and stuff like
Right,
that.
exactly. Yeah. Where is that in the DSM? Stop. Yeah. I totally, but you know what? It's just easier to, what is it, label or diagnose somebody with something, and let's not look at that other part. You
Right.
know.
I,
But
I
that
was
was
hoping
very,
that.
that was that you were honest. You had questioned him, and probably his parents were hoping it was going to be something different. But
Yeah.
it is what it is,
I
and a
was.
lot of people don't realize that, even especially when you got that type of diagnosis, which part of the thing is that that they take their meds on a regular basis, but sometimes
Yeah.
even when they do that, they can still cycle off of them, and they do that weird stuff like what you described, that they leave, and
Yeah. Yeah.
probably, I'm sure he was getting his meds, and then they'll come back. But that's sometimes why, unfortunately, that type of diagnosis, it's really difficult for them to be living like on their own, because they stop taking their meds, or if they cycle off, and then um, it can get really ugly, especially when they go through those episodes. But you were describing that he's hearing a voice telling him to hurt his family. That's like,
Yeah. Right. I was really hoping that it was going to be an attachment because I know I could fix that, and unfortunately, with his condition, it can't be cured, and you can improve it at the moment, but there's nothing that can cure it, and he fit the mold because schizoaffective disorder. You're not born with it being obvious. It comes out a little bit
yeah,
later in life, and it's usually triggered by something dramatic, something that really shook you and then all of a sudden, boom, you got this.
yeah,
So it in a sense, it's kind of like a parasitic attachment too. So it really, I'm still, you got to wonder because there are similarities there, and a parasitic attachment, how it starts is the same as a schizoaffective disorder, kind of kicks off the same way with something life altering that usually triggers it. And so you got to wonder, but unfortunately, if it is something like that, it's a different type of entity or something, or an attachment, or it just is a
Let me ask
disorder.
you, Shane,
And yeah,
what happens, like, let's say in the cases where you've been brought in and the person's got an attachment, obviously they're looking for help. They're like, this is happening, or after I moved here, or this, like these triggering events. What do you think happens? And I don't know if you've even run across this. Somebody that, for lack of a better word, invited it or is receptive to it, does it just totally take them over to where basically they basically de-escalate and become horrible human beings and do horrible things? You think that some of the, I want to say, horrific things that sometimes you see that people do to another person is a result of an attachment?
I think sometimes, yeah. But what I found is the majority of the people that are being attacked by these parasitic entities are very, very sensitive people. They're usually very caring,
Okay.
loving people. They wear their heart on their sleeves, which also makes them a
Yeah.
target, I guess.
Yes.
And I think we should all be that way. But unfortunately, even in real life, there's human beings that will take advantage of us
Oh, yeah.
when we're that way.
Of course.
They'll feed off of that, Oh, Shane won't say no. I can get anything I want out of him, and because or I can act however I want and he'll forgive me, and and stuff like that. And so there's living parasites, human parasites, but these parasitic entities are the same way. So I think most of the time what I've seen is most of the time the people that have these parasitic attachments are usually really loving and beautiful people really on the inside, and they're super sensitive emotionally, and that is kind of can become a problem if they don't have the right knowledge on how to circumvent these attachments.
Well,
but
exactly, like they have that vulnerability, and
yeah,
a lot of people, and I'm glad you brought it up, because sometimes, again, I'm going to thank Hollywood. Like you said, people think that whether they're being haunted themselves or their house or whatever, that they think that somebody's going to come in and wave a magic wand and it's over, it's done. And that's what you described, where sometimes they'll bring in boatloads of different people and it just calms down and then it comes right back.
Right, and it usually comes back a lot worse when it does.
Yes, because they're just trying to address what's not there. In the
I did a case in Orange, Massachusetts, where this family had moved into the town that I live in right now in southern New Hampshire, but they still owned another house in Orange, Massachusetts, and they were trying to sell it or rent it out, but whenever somebody would be interested, it would fall through. They had even a blind lady that was walked through the house, and she said, she didn't want to live there because it felt too dark to her.
Wow.
But they had all kinds of things happen in the house, anything from the ceiling fan just spinning on its own to things moving across the room to them seeing weird beings moving in the woods or in the trees. And then they said, the guy said he saw Native Americans in the woods. And then also the final straw was when their son, who was 4 years old, was grabbed by his ankles and pulled right out of bed, hit the floor. They heard thump thump, and then they heard the kid crying a little bit. They went in there. He had red handprints on his ankles, and so whatever it was grabbed him really hard. And the kid said, "The man with the red face pulled me out of bed." And so they had they had one famous group go in that's on TV, I'd say famous, but on TV. Mm-hmm. And then they had a famous or well-known, you see him on TV, demonologist, who's a nice guy, and his team went in there, but the process didn't work. They said when he did his thing, he did the oils, and he put crosses on all the doors and all that. And I saw that with a black light. I put a black light, and I could see all the crosses that he put. And they said it seemed to help for a little while, but then it came back worse than ever. And that's when the kid got attacked, and other things started happening. And because they went back to old ways of thinking, and there was also marital issues there, and they're now divorced. And they would never talk to me about that, but I knew it when I was there that there was marital issues. They didn't tell me, but I knew there was. And but basically, hold on a second. So they move out of the house. It was a nice double wide trailer in a trailer park and stuff. Real cozy little place, and they bought a colonial in the town I live in. Mm-hmm. Now they have 2 mortgages and stuff like that, so it's kind of a burden. They're not able to sell it or rent it, and they're like, can you help us? Because now they have things going on in both houses. So this parasite's going back and forth. It's still going back to the old house, which is kind of rare because it usually attaches to the people. But the thing was, sometimes these parasites will feed off of events that took place in time, and they can feed off of that event for however long they want, because it's something that ripples through space time and that environment through parallels. And so so this thing was bouncing back and forth. It was doing stuff in their new home, but also affecting things in the other house. And so I went over to the original house, the one in Massachusetts that they moved out of, and I could feel it instantly. This thing was strong and nasty. And I basically chased it around the house, and it ended up going into the master bath and hiding in there. And it seemed to be where it liked to hide, you know.
Uh-huh.
And so I was contacted by this young guy who's in his mid-20s, and he's like, hey, I think I'm sensitive. He goes, I've been my whole life, and I really want to, you know, learn about this stuff. And I talked to him for a little while, and he seemed real level-headed and in the right character type. So I said, sure, you can go to this case with me. The house is empty, so we're not you know, you're not going to interact with people. So I think it's a good time for me to take you on this one, but I'm not going to do anything with you there because I've learned from that mistake in the past.
Right.
Somebody that thought they were ready wasn't. And so we go there, and he goes, wow, this feels really weird in here. And I'm like, and I said, you want to see weird? That thing's in the master bath right now. I know it is. He goes, how do you know? I said, I just know it. So we walk into the master bedroom, and the door to the master bath was closed almost all the way. It wasn't latched, but it was like closed without being, you know, latched. And I go over. I said, stand over there, and he stood on the other side of the corner of the room. And I started my hand towards that doorknob to open the door. The door flew open on its own so hard, it slammed against the paneling, blew the drapes up from the air pressure. I feel a gust run by me. The bedroom door slams shut, and this thing took off out of the room and just slammed the door behind it. And this kid was like, "Oh, what the hell?" You know. And
and what did he do? Did he stand his ground, or did he bolt?
He settled down pretty quickly. I was
Okay.
impressed because it shocked the crap. Like it scared him.
Yeah.
And but he calmed down because I gave him the you know, basically the routine, how to act, and if something happens, don't do this, don't do that, on our way down. And so, but basically, I had to identify what was going on here without these people really being open with me. And so I could feel that there was a marital issue, and that was part of the problem. But the other part was that the man had a paranoid personality, really bad, like very, very hyper paranoid personality. And so when he moved in, it was her house first. They became a couple. He moved in, and he started seeing Native American entities or you know, apparitions in the woods. And now this property was on a grounds that had a bloody battle between two tribes over the land, because there was a nice river, it was good fishing, and so there was this bloody battle. And so there was, you know, those dramatic events tend to create you know, bleedovers in parallels in space-time. So we were able to witness something that happened at a different time because of these dramatic frequencies, emotional frequencies from these events. And so he was witnessing this stuff. So what he did was he started to become a paranormal investigator, and he started to stay out all night, you know, at night, and try to get pictures of it and take recordings. And so I said, you know, are you dabbling in this stuff? And he's like, no, I don't even watch movies on it. But I knew he was lying to me. I go into his room. There's a book that was like 3 inches thick, and it was all about demons and, you know, their names and characterizing demons. And so he started to dabble in this stuff. And with that paranoid personality, he was the right person. You know, he was feeding this thing. And now a parasite said, okay, hey, you know, this guy, he's going to pay attention. So this thing pops in and starts attacking them, and we're doing stuff in their house and attacking their kid. So I had to treat the family, but I also had to treat that property over there. So I actually did a native ceremony on that property to gain acceptance from the natives, that energies that were there, but also to and basically in hopes that they would help keep the parasite gone from that location. And then I could treat the family in their new location with the education and the understanding of the mechanics and what to do, what not to do type of thing. And fortunately it worked, and they were problem free, but their marriage still did fail. A year or two later, they did break up. But,
No.
but
And was he accepting of, I imagine, your advice, which is don't dabble in that anymore? Did he
I,
accept that?
yeah, he actually did. It was surprising because I didn't expect that with his personality type. I thought that he was very interested in it and wouldn't, because if we're passionate about something, it's hard. You're not going to tell people to stay away from their passions. Unfortunately, when it's a passion like that and you're the wrong character type, it's not good medicine,
Not at all. Not
And
at all.
so, but he actually did. And so when he walked in the house after I was the original house, after I was done doing that, it was a very exhausting, very spiritual thing that I did there, which is normally what I don't do that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
This was normally it's like I said, dealing with the true mechanics. But this, I had to pull in. I had to try to tap into those native energies that were there through the parallels, like we talked about, and gain acceptance of this family. And so it was a long process. But when I did it, and I kid you not, it's like you see on these dramatic TV shows. It was like somebody took a dimmer switch and turned it up in the house. Like that, there was no lights on, but the house just became so much brighter. I could see it getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and I knew what I did worked. And so I texted him and I said, or I called him. I'm not sure. I said you can head over now. Because I told him I did not want him there until I was done, until I gave him the clear, because he was part of the issue, and I knew that.
Yeah, I was going to say, it sounds like he was a catalyst in all this. I'm sure, like you said, the dynamic with them was not that best, but he sounds like he was the epicenter.
Yeah, he was, definitely. And so he walked in, and he goes, oh, my God. He's like, this house has never felt like this. He goes, not even after the other people were here. He goes, it seemed to help a little bit at first. He goes, but this is totally different. He says, usually when he pulls into the trailer park, he would get migraines immediately. He said, but I didn't get that. And then I'm in the house now, and he goes, it feels great. He goes, it smells good. It just feels really good. So after quite a while of them trying to rent it or sell it, 5 days after I dealt with it, they had people that wanted to buy it, people that wanted to rent it. They ended up renting it to a gentleman, and he's lived there and has had no issues in that home at all. And so,
and people don't realize that people can walk in there, and they might not necessarily say it's a ghost, but they kind of on a metaphysical plane, something inside of them is thinking, "I want to get out of here," But they just, in other words, they don't buy it or they don't rent it because they might not understand it. It's not necessarily because they think it's haunted. It's they just feel uncomfortable when something like that is part of the environment. How many house sales fall through because of that, and people don't realize that that's what it is?
Yeah.
Shane, does any of the work that you do, as far as, does it have anything to do with a person's aura, as far as if it's whole or not, or that has nothing to do with a person being vulnerable?
As far as what? I'm
how
sorry?
your aura, like your auric body, that usually we have like a little bit of like a field around our bodies, okay? Which of course some people can see, but most people can't in the Curlian photography, blah blah blah. Some of the theories are that if your aura is either damaged or get holes for different reasons, it could be physical trauma, it could be emotional trauma, if you've got substance abuse problems, anything. That sometimes if your aura thins out, it makes it easier for you to get an attachment. Do you think that theory has any validity, or it's just a question of people with unresolved stuff from their background?
I think it's all a matter of, in what I've been able to deduce through the work is, and what I understand is, it's all to do with frequency, emotional frequency. And there was a time, a long, long time ago, where I would hear vibrational frequency and I would be like, that's cuckoo, that's weird. That's weird talk. But it absolutely, once I was able to really start connecting dots and stuff like that, I realized that it absolutely is everything to do with our frequency, our emotional frequencies. So if we do have a trauma that we haven't been able to work through,
Right.
it could have happened a million years ago. It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't matter if it's something that still affects us in our spirit, in our hearts, in our minds. Then it affects our frequency and it leaves us vulnerable. So we need to. Acceptance is such a big word, and it's so important in our lives. It's like, things happen. If we
Right.
dwell on them, then it keeps us in a bad place. We need to move on, and it's hard to do that unless
Yes.
we learn acceptance. Sometimes we have to just accept things. It's hard, but it's something, you just
Right.
accept it and move past it, move beyond it and above it.
Right. And I guess a lot of people, and I think that's the human condition, when bad things happen to people, especially inexplicable stuff, whether it was like as you're as a kid or as an adult, whatever, that everybody thinks, why me? What did I, why, or, or stuff like that. And they never get beyond, like you said, the acceptance part where maybe you didn't do anything to bring it on, but it just happened. It happened. But they're
Yep.
still kind of like what you're describing, caught on that hamster wheel of why me, or they can't accept it. They want to try somehow to, you know, make it different. And time travel is not possible. You can't go back in time and redo that. But if
Right.
you're stuck
And a lot of
thinking about it like what you described, it's like you're basically reliving those moments over and over again.
Right, and the other problem too is these people will use that occurrence that happened to them as an excuse for being,
Yes.
ineffective or not moving forward in life, or being, achieving goals, and they blame it on that occurrence,
Yes.
and stuff like that, and they use it as a crutch, and it's so important, and or they're fearful of being hurt again, and fear. I'll tell you what, I believe that the equal, equivalent, opposite of love is not hate. I absolutely believe it's fear,
Yes.
because fear is
Yes.
such a debilitating thing. Love can empower, fear can
Yes.
just wreck everything.
Hmm.
And that's how these entities work, and that's what negative things that are done to us in our lives. That's how they work. That's how they keep us down. That's what connects us to these parasites.
Yeah.
So, we have to live in love and light, and not be fearful, and just, be who we are. Because when we are who we are, we can, we know who we are, we identify who we are, we can be who we are, and we can love who we are.
Right, and nobody leads
All
a
right.
perfect life. Some people have worse breaks than other, but like you said, if you're gonna have that event be your story, it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, well, you
Yeah.
know what, that happened, but I'm gonna make my story something different. And you do have that power. Is basically what you're saying. You do have that power to make it different, despite what
Oh,
might have happened to you.
absolutely,
And you know what you
absolutely.
said? You said something, and I'm gonna ask you. I'm gonna ask you real quick because I'm gonna segue into this as nothing. You know, when you were describing about that kid that was up in Vermont, that he had gone to Sedona and he had like a kind of like had a bad reaction. You're the second
Yeah.
person within the last 2 weeks that has told me a similar bad experience of going to Sedona. And the reason why I ask about this is because Sedona is thought of as an epicenter of spirituality and good vibes. And when you said it, I was like, man, what a coincidence. This is the second person I hear mention that they've had some type of negative reaction when going to Sedona. And it's like, I wonder why that is.
Yeah, it really had an impact on this family too, because even the dad said, "Have you ever been there?" I said, "No." He goes, "Oh, you gotta go. It's so special, And I was like,
Uh
"I have
huh.
no idea. Like I've never. I heard a little bit about it, but I haven't really researched it. So,
Right,
um,
right. Although the person
yeah,
that told me about it, his reaction was he started getting nauseous and throwing up. He had to leave. Like, when he had to like get out of there. He says that once he cleared the area of the town, he felt better. But he said, "Matt," he says, "I felt so horrible. I felt like nauseous, throwing up. It was like," and he says, "As soon as I got out of there, everything stopped." And now you mentioned that, and it's like, okay, not every place affects everybody the same way. Interesting.
right, yeah,
Hmm. Very interesting. You know, Sometimes, and I think that when you get places like Sedona, which, you get a lot of people going out there for either spirit communication or putting vibes out, you, in that crowd, you always get the ones that are pretending to be motivated by good, but not really. and,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, exactly.
and they bring in or put out, whatever you want to call it, just bad things altogether. But anyway, Shane, I wanted to thank you so much for spending this time today. I'm going to put a link to your website, but if you could mention what is your website for the people that are listening on the podcast, where they could reach you at.
The website is trueghost.com, trueghost.com, and the website is terrible right now. It was redone, but I don't like it. I hate it. So it's going to be redone soon, and but you can find contact information there. You can
Okay.
look me up on YouTube and Google me for other shows and other appearances and stuff like that too. So.
Okay. And do you have any projects coming up now in the near future?
Um, No, I just got done with a lot of UFO conferences
Okay.
back to back to back, and we are scheduled to. We were supposed to be going out to a Pennsylvania area, flap area we call it, paranormal flap area in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we should be there now actually, but we had to postpone it. So, but we're working in Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. We're getting around, but yeah. So
Okay. Okay. But I'm sure that if anything, that you would post it up on your website if you were going to be attending any event or at any location or any show. Do you post that up on your website?
I haven't been very good at that. I'm gonna try to
Ah.
be try to be better with that. And yeah, the best thing is like on Facebook, I'm more active there. So
Okay.
um, so
But there's a ways to reach you. Whether it's to find out what you're at, or especially for somebody that like you described is at their wits end. Having something going on with them, and I imagine that if you can't help them, do you have any reputable groups that you know of that you can recommend for them? Because I know sometimes when you've been doing this for a while, you know who you can trust as far as a recommendation, who is like no, and I
yeah,
know.
there's really no other groups when it comes on a high end level
Mm-hmm.
because I had to help out and bail out a lot of these groups. So there's really not any groups that I'm aware of that on a high end haunt, like a very active negative haunt that I could
Okay.
recommend. Besides Paul, who's my brother, we collaborate a lot together.
Mm-hmm.
But the best thing is I help people all around the world just simply by talking to them over the phone. I
Oh,
identify the
perfect.
problem. Yeah, so I mean, I talk to people in India, Australia, you name it, and I'm able to break down what's going on with them and prescribe a treatment for their
Okay.
particular situation, and it's worked every time. So I help people all around the world that just by talking to them.
Great. That is fantastic. So in other words, you physically don't have to be there. You can work at a distance. In other words.
Yeah, as long as the people are open and honest and they're able to communicate what's going on. Some people are more reserved because they
Sure.
don't they haven't met me in person, so we're only talking on the phone. So
Yeah.
there's some things that they don't want to open up about, so it's hard to deal with that. But if they're open with me about every step of the way, I can pinpoint what the issue is and prescribe a treatment and basically how tell them what to do, what not to do, what they've been doing wrong, and
Mm-hmm.
how to fix it. And it works every time.
Fantastic. Excellent. All right. Thank you again, Shane. I want to wish you the best of luck. Okay. And I would love to bring you back so that we could talk about ufology.
Yeah,
Because
great.
that
That'd
right
be
there, that's a whole. I mean, I think people are finally, and I know not everybody's on the same, but I think a lot of, as far as ufology and extraterrestrial, they're starting to break out of the thought that everything has to travel. I mean, I'm not saying it's not that, but as far as maybe the way they travel is not the way we think of as in linear space or on a spaceship or on a flying saucer. It could be other ways.
right.
And there's other type of
Yeah.
phenomena which a lot of people also describe that coincides when they have a UFO sighting, um,
Hmm.
versus just something a light in the sky. There's other things that I think that now that a lot of people are actually noting it, they see a trend. In other words, Like, what a
Right.
coincidence. There's UFO sightings, and then there's sightings of either cryptids or whatever the case might be, or people having weird experiences. And they're doing
Right.
those
Yeah.
correlations. So I would love to have you come back and we can talk about that, because that in and of itself is fascinating.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'd like to thank you for having me.
No,
And you've been
absolutely.
a great host. And this has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, and have a great night. Take care.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye. Wow. What an interesting guest. He is something else. Okay. And this is for those people out there where, because you know, and how can I say it? I'm so glad he brought this up, as far as what he described, where people sometimes either have groups, or even it sounds like demonologists or exorcism priests, whatever, coming in there and trying to help out, and basically it just subsides and then comes back. Okay? And people don't realize that what happens to you, either as a child or somewhere along your life, and people have heard me talk about this before, especially about telling people, this is not the kind of paranormal investigations, is like, not really for you, because sometimes you just have this vulnerability in you that if you put yourself in a bad situation or a case or a household that you walk in, basically you're opening yourself up for a really horrible experience, especially if you had something like this happen in your background. And maybe you might have dealt with it, kind of, but you're doing okay. You're making your way in your life. But then you come into a case. Let's say you start doing paranormal investigations, like what he was describing, and then you walk into a really ugly, malevolent, dark case. And guess what? You, like he said, whatever is there, this parasitic entity, will see that vulnerability and then dredge up old memories, unresolved things, uh, and basically torment you, because basically that's how it works. They torment you into depression, lack of hope, uh, and of course everything that comes with it, because let's face it, what happens in your head affects the rest of your body, how you feel, how your outlook is on life. And then it's like a domino effect. It maybe affects, your interaction with your family. It affects your interaction at work, or how well you perform. I mean, and I've said this before, contrary to sometimes what people think of when they see the movie where, you cross paths with the thing, entity, whatever, and then by the end of the week, you know, horrible things are happening to you. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, that's really very seldomly the way it goes. It starts to unravel little by little. And then I think what happens is, depending on how far this goes, or you can pull yourself out of it. And I talk about this a lot, about as far as when people get hopeless and they isolate themselves. And this is basically what's pushing you along to do that, because that's what it wants to do. It wants to feed off your fear, hopelessness, the feelings that people get. Nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, nobody understands me. um, it's like a domino or snowball effect. And the point I'm trying to make is, sometimes for this to take place is days, weeks, months. Things start to unravel, and then maybe a year, 2 years down the road, you go from everything was okay. No, when I mean okay, nobody walks around with a perfect life, and you deal with things that come up, and you try your best to resolve them, and then you move on. But you're not hopeless. And then you see people that get to this point, they look back and it's like, man, what happened? And then this thing invades basically your life and your mind. And the point I'm trying to make is, long before you see crap flying across the room, okay, something very physical or tangible that you could say, oh my God. Or in the case of what he described with this lady, this poor woman in her 70s is being basically re-victimized. She's because basically what that entity was trying to do is recreate the terror and helplessness she felt as a child. Not only was she being molested and raped, but by the person who should have been taking care of her. That's like a double betrayal to a child. Okay? So this thing, whatever, was the act in and of itself was horrible, but it was probably doing it like he described the exact same way that her father would approach her, which heightened her fear, heightened her feeling of helplessness, basically puts you into what they call a state of PTSD, which is where you relive that memory like if it happened hours or a day before. Smells, feelings, everything is fresh and sharp, which is why it's so difficult sometimes people with PTSD, why it's so important for them to get help, because sometimes the passage of time doesn't diminish the memory, because everybody's had bad things happen to them, and when they're fresh it hurts and you kind of examine it, but normally as time goes by, it, depending of course on what the incident was, the edges soften. They soften, and the harsh emotion kind of softens, and then that 24/7 mentality lets go, where you stop thinking about it, and there comes a point where, yeah, it'll hurt your heart, but you're not there continuously reliving it. But for somebody that's had some type of trauma, that softness never diminishes. The feeling, the fear, the anger, whatever's involved in it, never gets any less. And basically what that entity was doing to this poor lady was revisiting her and making her feel the fear just like she had done probably 60 years before. And I know I've said this before in other shows, but I want to say it again. And I'm glad he brought it up, a lot of stuff that happens to people, and I'm going to say especially as children. Why? Because when you're a child, besides the fact that you're a child, you don't have a myriad things it could be something at the hands of the people that are meant to protect you, number one, or you are shamed or afraid to talk about what happened, or you're threatened to keep it quiet. And let's face it, when you're a child, where are you going to go? What are you going to do? Yeah, if you maybe sometimes when you're a teenager and adolescent, you run away. But if you're younger, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? You're at the mercy of whatever's happening to you to stay put and endure it. And sometimes this trauma, and this happens, in a perfect world, none of these horrible things would ever happen to anybody. But when they do, and I think that's what Shane was referring to, that these people, they basically start reliving it and recalling it. And this is this thing about your brain. When you start reliving these memories, and you start, your brain doesn't know that what you're seeing in your head is a memory that maybe happened years and years and years ago. And what happens is your body starts reacting. It starts putting out cortisol. Your heartbeat could elevate. Some people even break out into a sweat if you're really good. If your imagination is one of these and you decide to pick that scab and relive every horrible second of it, guess what? Your body will start reacting like if that incident is actually taking place. Your body doesn't know that it's just a memory. Okay? And what he's talking about is that all these feelings, all these things that are going on in your body and in your mind and in your spirit is basically putting out a calling card. And I've said it, like attracts like. Okay? Tell me how angry you are and I'll tell you how scared you are, because that's what it is. Anger is usually a big cover for I'd rather be angry than scared, but really it's fear. fear is the feel of anger. Okay? So it's like a track like. If something happened to you and you were fearful or you were angry or whatever the case might be, basically it's a track like, and then what you do is you get this parasitic entity which is saying, you know what, I can feed off this person because they've got this memory lodged in their conscious or subconscious mind. And all I have to do is whip it a little bit and maybe do some things. And then on top of the fear that they're going to experience from recalling that incident, I'm going to make them even more fearful by maybe invading their dreams. Typical stuff that sometimes you see in hauntings where people are like totally wigged out. Feelings of being watched. He made mention of a couple of people there that were a little bit on the paranoid side. What do you think happens to a person that's already got like a little bit of paranoia in their personality? And then you get an entity which starts making them feel like, I'm watching you, you're being watched, even maybe when you leave the house, or something's watching you from the closet. These things, basically, what he was saying was they know what you fear the most, and on an intuition, on a metaphysical level, and that's where they attack you through. And I'm sure it's more in depth than what he was describing or what I'm describing, but you know, part of it is, like he said, it's not whether you say you forgive or anything, whatever the perpetrator was. Sometimes, like, it's almost disempowering. It's like, no, I don't want to forgive you. You can't fake it, in other words. You can't, by this, I guess what I'm saying is a lot of people think that you say you forgive somebody is that you're basically okay with it. And what's the use of saying I forgive somebody if you really don't feel it? But if you accept it, say I don't forgive you, but I accept that this happened, and there's nothing I can do or say to change what happened, but I'm going to move away from it because that's not going to be my story, and I hope you burn in hell. Screw it. Hello, if that's what the empowering that you need to move off, as long as you don't keep on reliving that moment, somehow being able in your mind to twist time and go back and undo it. And now, if you can forgive that person, do it. If part of that you truly forgive them without thinking I'm saying I forgive this person because it's the good thing, but I really deep down inside, if you really like could look at the way you felt, it's not really there. And what's really funny is about real forgiveness, sometimes what he described as far as acceptance, acceptance, moving on, and you say, I'm not ready to forgive this person, what they did was horrible. Persons, or plural, persons, whatever the case might be. And you're saying, no, I'm not going to forgive this person. Screw it. But I'm going to go beyond this, and that's it. I'm not going to be victimized by this. I'm not going to have it overshadow my life. And I'm not going to dwell on it, and I'm going to live my life. Like she said, your focus is away from that. Somewhere in that time period, maybe years, something in you does forgive. Sometimes not. Everybody's different. Everybody's different. It's like, but I'm not going to sacrifice my life on the altar of these events that happened to me, because I do have power over what happens to me from now on. And that self-control, that feeling of power, let me tell you something. It's very, very, very powerful, especially when you're going into something what like Shane described, because a lot of people feel, and I've talked about it, where they feel at the mercy of what's going on. They feel victimized. They're at the mercy. Shit's flying around their house. I'm having bad dreams. My relationships are falling apart. Maybe my kids are getting attacked, and I can't concentrate at work. And they feel like they're under slot of something they can't touch, something they can't feel. Now, you want me to tell you the antidote to that? Being able to feel some type of control. And you know how you do that? Exactly like what he said. I'm not gonna play the game. I'm gonna take my focus out of it. I'm gonna laugh a lot. I'm gonna go outside. I'm gonna go to the park. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. depending on your finances, there's a lot of stuff that you can do for free, believe me. Um, but I'm not going to stay at the house. And it's almost like once you shift your attention, which is equivalent to you drawing back the fear, the dread, this thing starts to fizzle because it's nothing for you to feed off of it. Okay? And I think that for a human being, having to have that type of control is a very important step towards having this recede. Sometimes certain things are happening where you do need somebody like Shane to come in and kind of guide you out, because like he described, sometimes there's certain dynamics going on with the people in the family, whether it's the adults or whatever, where you know what, they're never going to do this on their own. They need somebody, an expert like Shane, come in and say and do what he does, talk to them, and basically have him look at really what is causing what's going on with them. Okay. But there's a lot of stuff that people can do before it totally slides into a full blown stuff flying in your house or seeing horrible things, and it basically making your life horrible, unraveling your life, so that even if you recover, there's a lot of stuff that you lose along the way. And by this, I'm not talking about material stuff, even though that's bad, but sometimes you lose relationships, sometimes you lose marriages, sometimes you lose jobs, sometimes you lose homes by the time that you come to grips with the idea of like, man, you know what? I've got to resolve this wound that's inside of me, and then this thing is going to go away. It's an interesting thought. But anyway, guys, yeah, I'm going to put a link to Shane's website on my on the credits of the show. It's trueghost.com. I urge you to visit, even though he poo-pooed it. Or of course, you know, if you need to reach out to him, also Facebook's another thing, whether you're trying to figure out if he's going to be doing at any event or you need his help. You know, maybe you are one of these people who's had people come in and nobody is helping you. Or maybe you've been putting up with something for years and years, and you've moved from place to place thinking you can outrun it, and now you're at the realization this is not a problem with the location, it's the problem is me. Or maybe somebody you're married to. So, you know, reach out to, and what he talked about, that he doesn't even need to see you in person. You know, but of course, if you don't reach out to him, there's no way he can help you. Anyway, guys, don't forget, go to miamighostchronicles.com. There you can find links to either the YouTube video. I've got also links to the MP3 files if you want to download the podcast, or I even got links to the different podcast platforms, so that you can, if there's any of the podcast platforms that you use to download MP3 files, I've got links that will take you directly to our shows on that platform. Best bet, go to miamighostchronicles.com, and from there, of course, also if you want to submit your true story, my true believers, you can do that at Submit Your Story tab. If you want to send me an email, the point of contact, the best one is going to be, or you could go also to storiesofthesupernatural.info. That'll work as well. If you want to reach out to me, whether with a story, a question, suggestions for the show, or if you want to hear any of the shows when they're archived. Like I said, I have everything from the first show all the way to the most recent release on there. Pretty soon, I'm hoping maybe by the time you hear this this show, I will have already released. I just finished filming a show up in Toronto for a new show that's going to be coming out, which I believe it's going to air now in the fall in Canada, and I believe it's going to air here in the U.S. now to either January or February. Once I get the right dates, then I'll announce it. I want to be in that show, and I've got a couple of other things going on, and I'm writing a book. I'm writing 2 books I had a request to, I was writing a little book about just very unusual true ghost stories, obscure stuff. But it was really funny because I've had a lot of people ask me, like, oh, what to do, like a DIY, for lack of a better word, if you think that you might have a problem with a haunting or something's going on. And so I'm putting together a little book about, almost for lack of a better word, supernatural DIY, or supernatural safety. And in this advice, I'm going to make it stuff that you can do maybe before you call a paranormal team in, or what I tell people, what to do before you move to a place or after you leave a place, because I've done investigations where I've had people come in and they're saying, we sold this house and we just want to make sure that whatever's here doesn't go with us. I've had investigations like that. And what things that you can do, again, because I'm into empowering people. And in the book, of course, I'm going to make mention that there's certain things that it's like, you need help. You need to get a team in there. And we'll, in the book, eventually I'll talk about that, and along the way I'll talk about some of my cases and things that have happened to me. But I'm working on that book. I'm hoping to have that out maybe by the end of this year, December of 2018. And again, guys, I want to thank you so very much for being part of my audience. You guys are absolutely wonderful. And I truly appreciate the time that you spent here listening to the show or seeing the video. So again, I hope you're going to be coming back next week, and take care.